They thought it would be easy. A remote cabin, a lone woman, a quick score before anyone noticed. They thought they were the hunters. But when three desperate men broke through the glass and stepped into the dark, they found they had become the prey. Waiting in the shadows, silent as snowfall and twice as lethal, were two massive white wolves. And what happened next would be remembered in Montana, not as a robbery, but as the night the wilderness itself fought back. The Bitterroot Range is a world of silence after sundown. On that autumn night, the air carried the sharp bite of the season, dry leaves rattling like bones as the wind slithered down from the ridges. The forest outside Claire Donovan's cabin stirred like a restless ocean. But inside, the world was steady, quiet. A single lamp glowed on her desk, casting amber light over maps and reports. Claire was hunched over her papers, finishing her weekly notes for the Forest Service. Routine work, trail conditions, elk sightings. Behind her, near the fire, the wolves slept, or seemed to. Fenrir sprawled like a slab of marble, his chest rising and falling in slow rhythm. Scotty curled smaller, paws tucked beneath her, ears twitching to the night's music. To anyone else, they would have seemed relaxed. Claire knew better. Wolves never truly sleep. The cabin smelled of pinewood smoke and coffee, the very picture of safety. Which is why the first shift in the air snapped through her like an electric current. Fenrir's head came up. His ears were erect, his pale eyes burning in the lamplight. A low, warning rumble started in his throat, a sound that carried the weight of millennia. Scotty was on her feet even faster, drifting toward the front door like a ghost, every hair along her spine standing rigid. Claire froze. She set her pen down without a sound. She'd lived with them for 3 years, ever since she'd found them as pups in a poacher's snare, bleeding out in the snow. She knew the difference between a casual stir and a true alarm. Coyotes in the distance didn't cause this. A bear nosing around the garbage didn't make Fenrir's growl that deep, that absolute. This was human. Her pulse hammered against her ribs. She slid her chair back silently, her heart counting beats like footfalls. Wolves sensed danger long before humans ever could. And if both of them reacted together, it meant someone was close. Dangerously close. Easy, she whispered, laying a hand on Fenrir's neck. His muscles were stone beneath her palm. The growl eased a fraction, but his gaze never wavered from the stairwell leading down. Scotty stood rigid by the window, nose flaring. A single sharp turn of her head told Claire everything she needed to know. Someone was moving outside. The shatter came next. Glass broke in the kitchen with a sound that pierced the silence. It wasn't the sound of wind or weather. It was the deliberate crack of intrusion. A boundary crossed. Claire's training clicked into place. Assess, interpret, survive. She didn't reach for the landline. She knew it was dead. A storm had taken it out earlier, and the service trucks wouldn't make it up the mountain road for days. Her cell phone was useless. No bars. Not in this valley. She was alone. Utterly, completely alone. Except for the wolves. Her mind sprinted through the options. Run? If she leapt from the back window, she'd land right in the arms of the men circling her cabin. Stay, that meant a direct confrontation, but she had walls, shadows, and 2 predators on her side. She pressed her palm firmer against Fenrir's back. Quiet, she breathed. The growl tapered into silence, though his chest still vibrated with restrained thunder. Then the voices rose from below. Male, coarse. "You sure this is the place?" one asked, low and impatient. "Trust me," another answered. "She's got insurance money stashed here. A safe, cash, easy pickings." A third voice muttered, nervous. "What if she's home? She's alone, phones are cut, lights out, in and out. No problem." Claire's stomach turned to ice. They weren't random. They knew her. They knew the cabin. They even knew about the life insurance payout from her parents' accident, money she had never touched, locked away in a bank vault in town, not under her roof. Someone had fed them this lie. This wasn't chance. It was planned. She crouched low, sliding into the shadow of the wall. 3 men, experienced enough to cut the lights, confident enough to talk openly in her kitchen. And she was on the 2nd floor with nothing but 2 wolves and her will to survive. Flashlight beams slashed through the cracks of the floorboards, sweeping across the walls below. Boots creaked on wood. The smell of cheap tobacco drifted up. Fenrir snarled again, a sound too deep to be mistaken for anything but a lethal threat. Claire's hand clamped down hard. "Not yet," she murmured. He froze, but his stare never left the stairwell. Scotty slipped deeper into the shadows, her pale coat blending into the dimness. She was already hunting, waiting for the signal. Fear is normal. Panic is death. The training mantra echoed in her mind. The stairwell groaned under the weight of approaching boots. The first man's stride was measured, deliberate. The leader, the second was uneven, impatient. The follower, every creak of the old wood was a drumbeat counting down to a collision. Fenrir's muscles trembled under her palm, iron cables drawn tight. Scotty pressed herself to the floor, a coiled spring of white fury. The door to her room swung open. A harsh beam of light swept the room, blinding after the dim glow of her desk lamp. It carved over the bed, across the desk, and then it froze. It froze on two impossible figures, two wolves, standing in the center of the room like statues carved from snow and moonlight. Their eyes caught the light, Fenrir's a glacial blue, Scotty's a pale, burning amber. They glowed with an intensity that made them seem less like animals and more like spirits torn from the mountain itself. Their lips were curled just enough to show the gleam of long, sharp teeth. A promise, not yet a threat. The man in the doorway, Jake, stumbled back a step. His flashlight jerked wildly. "Jesus Christ," he hissed, his voice ragged. "That's no dog, Marcus. That's a wolf. White wolves, real ones." The second man, Marcus, held his flashlight steady. His face was a mask, his eyes sharp and calculating. He didn't see chaos, he saw a formation. A ranger standing tall. Two massive predators bracketing her like sentinels. The tableau of a commander with her guard. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was the low, resonant growl of the wolves, a vibration that hummed in the floorboards. Claire stepped forward half a pace. Her voice was steady, though her throat was tight as a wire. "You're trespassing on federal land and in my home," she said. "Step back. Leave now." Fenrir lowered his head, the growl deepening into a rolling thunder. Scotty drifted sideways, paws soundless on the wood, her body angling to flank them. She was a ghost in the dim light, a hunter finding her position. Jake's nerves snapped. His hand flew to the pistol at his hip, raising it with a trembling grip. "Shoot them," he rasped. "Marcus, for God's sake, before they tear us apart." "Don't," Marcus said sharply, his arm shooting out to block him. His flashlight never wavered from Claire's face. "Look at them, Jake. They're not charging. They're waiting. You fire and we're dead before you can pull the trigger twice." Jake swallowed hard, sweat beading on his forehead. His finger twitched on the trigger guard. Marcus stepped forward, slow and controlled. He studied Claire the way one predator studies another, measuring, testing. "You're not afraid," he said. It wasn't a question. Claire's chin lifted. "I've lived here long enough to know fear doesn't help. These wolves aren't monsters. They're my family. And if you lay a hand on me or them, you'll regret it." Jake barked a sharp, wavering laugh. "Family? You're insane. They're beasts. They'll rip your throat out the second they're hungry." "They've had plenty of chances," Claire shot back, her voice even as steel. "But they're still here with me. That should tell you everything you need to know." The air grew taut, stretched thin by the pressure of unspoken violence. This was no longer a simple burglary. It was a silent war, each side waiting for the other to blink. Marcus broke the silence. "We're not here for games," he said flatly. "We know about the insurance payout. We know there's money in this cabin, a safe, cash. That's why we came." The words hit Claire like cold water. The informant, someone close to the town, someone who knew her story, had sent these men here. This was a betrayal that cut deeper than any broken glass. Jake's frustration boiled over. "Enough talk. Let's tie her up and rip this place apart." Claire's stomach turned. If they bound her, it was over. Fenrir sensed her spike of tension instantly, his growl rising like a storm. Scotty's body lowered, weight shifting forward, ready to launch. "You won't find what you're looking for," Claire said, her voice cutting through the tension. "But I don't want blood on these floors. Not mine, not yours. Marcus's eyes flicked to Fenrir's bared teeth, then back to Claire. He saw the truth in her eyes. One wrong move, and his crew wouldn't walk out of here intact. He weighed his options, then gave a slight nod. You'll show us, he said, room by room, every hiding place. His eyes narrowed. But the wolves stay here. No, Claire countered immediately. Her voice didn't rise, but it sharpened like glass. If I walk out that door, they come with me. Leave them here, and they'll tear through that door before you take 10 steps. You don't want that. Marcus saw she wasn't bluffing. Slowly he inclined his head. Fine, they stay close. But one wrong twitch, and Jake puts a bullet in them. Jake's grin was thin and vicious, but his hands still trembled. Claire glanced at her wolves. Fenrir's eyes were locked on hers, steady, waiting for her lead. Scotty's tail gave the faintest flick, a silent signal of readiness. All right, Claire said quietly, her voice still wrapped in a terrifying calm. Then we do this together. Move, Marcus's voice cut through the silence, sharp as a blade. Every room, every corner. You go first. Claire drew a slow breath and forced her legs into motion. She descended the stairs, one deliberate step at a time. Fenrir pressed tight against her left side, Scotty melting along her right flank. They moved like white shadows in tandem with her, a living, breathing barrier between her and the men crowding behind. Jake followed close, his pistol raised, his irritation plain in every jerky movement. Behind him trailed the third man, Ricky, his eyes darting into the corners as though ghosts might leap out. He looked like a man who already regretted every choice that led him here. The flashlight beam swept across the living room. A broad wooden table piled with field journals, maps tacked to the walls, photographs of elk and wolves. It was a ranger's station, a place of study, not wealth. Marcus's expression tightened. This looks more like an office than a hiding place, he muttered. Jake's frustration erupted into violence. He kicked a stack of books near the hearth, sending them scattering across the floor. Damn nerds, he snarled, all this paper and not a cent of real money. The reaction was instant. Fenrir surged forward a half step, lips peeling back to reveal white daggers of teeth, a growl booming from his chest like an earthquake. Jake stumbled backward so fast he nearly tripped over a chair, his eyes wide with primal fear. His gun wavered dangerously. Easy, Claire said firmly, her voice hard enough to snap his attention back to her. She looked straight at Jake, unflinching. Don't touch my books again. For the first time, a ghost of a smile touched Marcus's lips. He was reading the dynamic, noting how she didn't cower, how the wolves reacted with precision, not chaos. Every move revealed a pattern, and it made him wary. Scotty circled slowly, her amber eyes locked on the men, a silent promise of what was to come. They forced her into the bedroom next. Spare furnishings, a rough-hewn bed, a pine dresser. Nothing extravagant. Jake stormed in, ripping drawers open, throwing clothes onto the floor. He pounded the back of the dresser, listening for hollow spots. His frustration mounted. Where is it? He barked, whipping around to glare at her. Where's the safe? When she didn't answer, he lunged, seizing her wrist and yanking her toward him. The response was immediate and terrifying. Fenrir exploded forward like lightning. He slammed his body between Claire and Jake, driving the man backward into the wall. His lips pulled fully back, teeth glistening, a snarl filling the room like a storm breaking. His hot breath fanned against Jake's cheek, each exhale a promise of bone and blood. Stop, Claire shouted, her voice sharp enough to cut through the frenzy. Fenrir froze on command, though the thunderous rumble in his chest remained. His gaze bored into Jake, who stood rigid, every nerve screaming in terror. The pistol slipped in his sweaty hand. Enough, Jake. Marcus's voice cracked across the room. Let her go now, unless you're eager to lose that arm. Shaking, Jake released his grip. Fenrir didn't move an inch, his body a solid wall of white fur between Claire and danger. The silence was suffocating. They had come expecting a lamb. They had found themselves inside a den with its alpha. Marcus steadied himself, reclaiming control. His voice was quieter now, but far more dangerous. Enough delays. Every hiding spot. You open them now. In the kitchen, Claire bent and pulled open a loose panel beneath the counter. She retrieved a rusted coffee tin. Marcus snatched it and pried it open. Inside were a few crumpled bills. Barely $300. He stared at it, his jaw tightening. That's it? That's all, Claire met his eyes. Maybe we got bad info, Marcus, Ricky whispered from behind him. Maybe there's nothing here. No, Jake snarled. She's lying. Keep looking. They pushed into the small study. Bookshelves lined every wall. Marcus gestured to a locked drawer. Open it. Claire unlocked it. Inside were research notes, maps of wolf territories, and a small wooden box. Marcus snapped the lid open. A few modest heirlooms glittered inside. A silver ring, a tarnished pendant. Family treasures priceless to her, worthless to them. He tossed the box to Jake. Pawn shop trash. Where's the payout, Ranger? Jake sneered. Where's the gold mine your folks left behind? Claire's jaw clenched. My parents were scientists. They left me research, not treasure. That's the truth. Jake slammed his fist on the desk. The wolves shifted, their bodies tensing, spelling danger. Marcus's patience frayed. The man who gave me this tip doesn't make mistakes, he said, rubbing his jaw. Someone's lying. Either you or him. If I don't see cash in the next 5 minutes, Jake's voice rose, cracking with frustration, I'll make her talk my way. He raised his pistol, the aim wavering between Claire and Fenrir. The wolves responded instantly. Fenrir's growl rose to a roar that made the floor vibrate. Scotty's lips curled back, her body coiled for a strike. The cabin was filled with the thunder of wolves ready to kill. Claire stood frozen in the center of the storm, her heart pounding. The standoff was stretched to its breaking point. One wrong twitch, one wrong word, and this room would be covered in blood. The cabin itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting. And then, from far down the switchback road, a new sound cut through the wind. The grinding cough of an old truck climbing the grade. Headlights swept the pines, found the clearing, and smeared white across the cabin windows. Everyone froze. Marcus's jaw tightened. Jake's eyes went wide with helpless rage. The plan was falling apart. Truck doors slammed. Gravel crackled under boots, measured and unhurried. The night had been a fist around the cabin. Those footsteps broke its grip. Claire, a voice roughened by years and weather carried clean through the dark. Lights are out. Everything all right up there? Walt Patterson, her 70-something ex-Marine neighbor. The closest thing she had to a guardian angel, hope, sharp and dangerous, pulled tight in her chest. Marcus moved before she could. His hand lunged, dragging her back against him. Cold metal kissed her temple. The click of a pistol's safety was as loud as a thunderclap. You say one word, Marcus breathed into her ear, his voice edged with steel, and you both die before he hits the porch. Fenrir's growl spooled up from the floor, a subterranean vibration that made the lamp tremble. Scotty eased toward Marcus's flank like a blade choosing where to strike. Jake swung his pistol toward the window, the barrel jittering wildly. Marcus, we should go, Ricky whispered urgently. We should go now. We are not leaving empty-handed, Marcus snapped. If that old man steps inside, he doesn't walk out. Outside, Walt's knuckles sounded against the door. 3 hard knocks. Claire, you hear me? You need a hand? Claire's lips parted, but she swallowed the word yes. Walt didn't wait. The knock turned into a pounding that carried impatience and fear. Get out of here, Jake yelled toward the door, his voice cracking. The wolves answered, not with words, but with a sound that climbed out of the earth and sang of old winters. Fenrir's roar rolled through the rafters. Scotty joined in, a high, terrifying pitch that set teeth on edge. The duet hit Jake like a physical blow. He jerked, his finger perilously near the trigger. Don't, Claire said, her voice a drawn wire. You pull that trigger, and they're inside you before you can fire again. Shoot them now, Jake hissed at Marcus. Claire, Walt called from outside, his fist hammering the door again. Say something or I'm calling the sheriff. Marcus's control faltered. Claire felt it, a tremor in the gun, a twitch in the hand at her shoulder. This was her moment. Fenrir, Scotty, her voice snapped like a dry branch. Hold. The command peeled the growls back, but it didn't dim the force coiling in their frames. They were 2 arrows nocked and waiting for release. Walt's fist hammered the door one last time. "Claire, I'm dialing 911. "Quiet," Marcus bellowed, his voice broadcasting pure panic into the trees. The silence cracked. Jake stumbled, his adrenaline-fueled foot catching on a book on the floor. He cursed, lifted his gun again, and in that same breath, Claire gave the order that changed everything. "Fenrir. Scotty. Guard." They moved together, as if the word were wind, and they were fire. Fenrir hit first, a white comet of fury. His jaws closed over Jake's wrist with surgical precision. The sound was wet and immediate, a snap of bone followed by a scream clawed from the bottom of a man's soul. The pistol pinwheeled through the air and clattered under the desk. Fenrir didn't thrash. He locked on, driving Jake into the wall, holding him there with the implacable force of a glacier. Scotty flowed in from the side, all speed and angle. She bowled Jake's knees out from under him and rode him down to the floor, her paws pinning his shoulders, her teeth a breath from his face. She didn't bite. She didn't have to. The message was already inside his bones. Claire tore away from Marcus's grip as he instinctively turned, his gun trying to track the white blur of violence. Ricky flattened against the far wall, his flashlight clattering to the floor. "We're finished," he panted, his voice breaking. "We're done." Outside, Walt's boots hit the porch with purpose, the sound of heavy metal on wood. "Call them off," Marcus snarled, swinging the pistol back toward Claire. "Call them off, or I paint this room red." But before he could finish the threat, the front door exploded. Old wood surrendered with a boom. The door flew off its hinges, and through the splinters came Walt Patterson, moving with the kind of steadiness that had once marched him into places most men didn't walk out of. The shotgun he carried was old, its twin barrels like two uncompromising eyes. He didn't point from the hip. He aimed. "Let her go," he said. The voice that had called across fence lines for 30 years had gone military flat, cold and sure. "Now." Marcus pivoted, cinching his arm around Claire again, ramming the pistol back against her temple. He tried to use her as a shield. "Back off, old man," he barked. "Back off or she dies." Walt's face didn't move, only his eyes did, flicking for a fraction of a second. He measured the rise and fall of Fenrir's shoulders, the marble stillness of Scotty pinning the screaming man, and the small exposed distance from his shotgun muzzle to Marcus's wrist. He took one step inside. "Son," he said, and it wasn't contempt, it was a statement of fact. "You're about to make a very permanent mistake." Marcus's brain scrambled for an angle, for an exit, and found none. His focus slid for just a blink toward the shotgun's barrels, a blink toward the blur of white that wasn't as still as he thought. It was enough. Fenrir left the floor in a line so true it might have been drawn. He didn't hit Marcus's chest. He didn't go for the throat. He struck the pistol wrist with a precision that would have made a surgeon jealous. Teeth closed over tendon and bone. The sound of the break was clear and obscene. Marcus howled. The gun tore free, skittering across the floorboards. "Fenrir, leave!" Claire's shout snapped like frost. The wolf released on the syllable, recoiling into a backward step that put his body between Claire and everything else again. Blood spattered across the planks. Marcus went to his knees, clutching his ruined arm, a sound of pure agony tearing from his throat. Scotty lifted off Jake with liquid grace, but kept a paw pressed near his shoulder, holding him in place. Jake's face had collapsed into a child's panic. He didn't move. He didn't dare. Ricky, the third man, let his own pistol fall from his numb fingers. He raised his hands high. "I'm done," he whispered, tears hot behind the words. "I'm done." Walt advanced 2 paces, the shotgun tracking with the slow patience of a clock hand. "Claire," he said, without looking away from the men, "you all right?" She stood in the center of the ruined room, breathing hard, a smear of blood on her sleeve. Her eyes were bright and narrow, alert to every twitch, but her voice was steady. "I'm all right." He nodded once. "Good." The silence that followed had weight, the kind that settles after a storm when you're counting what's left standing. "On your belly," Walt said to Marcus, "hands where I can see them." Marcus's mouth twisted. "I can't move my hand." "Then keep it where it is, the other one flat." Walt cut a glance to Ricky. You, step away from the gun, palms high. Ricky obeyed so quickly he almost tripped. Jake made a noise that wanted to be tough, but landed as a sob. He wrecked my arm. Breathe through it, Walt said, not unkindly. You're lucky he didn't take it off. Claire stepped between Fenrir and the men, drawing a line the wolves could read. She put one hand on Fenrir's ruff and the other on Scotty's shoulder. They sank to a sit, synchronized, disciplined. The room's threat softened without vanishing. Walt, she said, call Davidson. I intend to. He reached into his pocket, one eye still on Marcus, and thumbed his phone awake. Sheriff, he said when the line clicked, his tone all business. Armed home invasion at the Donovan cabin. 3 suspects, 1 injured, bad, 1 pinned, 1 surrendered. You'll want EMTs. He paused. And you'll want to see what did the pinning. There was a beat of silence on the line. Then Walt's mouth moved in what might have been a smile. Yes, Sheriff. Those wolves. The night resumed around them slowly. Through the smashed doorway, the forest watched. Far off, another wolf answered the tension with a brief ascending call. Fenrir's ears flicked. Scotty's head turned. They didn't answer. Not yet. Their work here wasn't finished. The minutes stretched. The click of Walt's phone sending coordinates. The ragged inhale of Jake fighting tears. The low buzz of Marcus's pain leaking into the silence. Units inbound, Walt reported. 20 minutes, give or take. Roads are a mess. Plenty of time to sit and think, Claire said to no one in particular. Marcus coughed a bitter laugh. You think this fixes it? You think it ends because you won tonight? It ends because no one died tonight, Claire replied. He looked at the wolves, at Fenrir's unblinking blue eyes, at Scotty's patient amber, and found he couldn't hold their gaze. He stared at the floor instead. Your neighbor, he muttered. I made a mistake. Several, Walt said. By the time the deputies taped off the doorway, the cabin smelled of antiseptic and sap. Marcus and Jake went out first. Jake on a gurney, his face grey. Marcus walking, his jaw clenched, his ruined wrist bandaged thick. Fenrir watched them go without a sound. Easy, Claire murmured, and both wolves settled. The immediate danger was gone, but a new one was just beginning. As the blue and red lights washed the trees, a deputy shouted from the tree line, We've got another one. Then another voice cursing, False alarm, tracks are gone. Ricky had slipped the net. In the first moments of chaos, he had vanished into the woods. By the time they brought the K9s, the mountain had swallowed him whole. They set up checkpoints, but it was no use. A man was loose in the mountains, a man who knew what had happened. And he was a loose end that could unravel everything. The news hit Cedar Falls like a wildfire. By morning, everyone knew. At the diner, the story was that the wolves were specially trained military animals. At the hardware store, a rancher swore he'd seen Claire give them hand signals. Like soldiers. A local paper ran the headline, Guardians of the Wild, Wolves Save Ranger. A radio host called it a miracle. Another station used the word attack, and a caller phoned in to ask if hikers should carry rifles now, just in case. The town was divided. Claire was either a hero or a menace. The wolves were either saviors or ticking time bombs. Claire ignored it all. She swept glass from her kitchen floor. Walt hammered a brace across the mangled doorframe. Sheriff Davidson lingered long enough to say in a low voice, There'll be questions. Then we'll answer them, Claire said. He nodded, his eyes grave. They won't all be asked by people who want answers. She knew he was right. The fight for her home was over. The fight for her family was just beginning. The officials came at dawn, a fleet of white SUVs crunching over the frost. Animal control and wildlife services. Clipboards, cameras, khaki jackets. All the uniforms that mean we're here to help, and also to decide your fate. A man with kind eyes and a perfect part in his hair asked if there was a secure room where they could stage. Stage what? Claire asked. Tranquilizer darts, he said gently, as if the words themselves were skittish. Ma'am, there was a bite. 2, actually. Which means, no. The word surprised even her with how solid it was. She planted both palms on her table. Absolutely not. Which means you'll read the report, Walt said, filling the doorway like a sentry. And you'll speak to the sheriff, and to me, and you'll watch if you like. But you won't be darting anything in this cabin today. The kind-eyed man swallowed. We're not here to be heavy-handed. We're here because any time a non-domestic canid injures a person, we have to evaluate. It's policy. Policy should admit the difference between a mauling and a disarmament, Walt said. Claire stepped forward. Fenrir and Scotty did not attack people, she said, her voice even and clear. They disarmed armed men who were threatening to kill me. They released the instant I commanded. They held. A vet tech, to her credit, was watching the wolves. Fenrir sat between Claire and the stove, his gaze unblinking. Scotty had drifted to a corner where she could see both the door and the back window. Neither growled. Both watched. Noted, the kind-eyed man said, scribbling on his clipboard. We'll need to initiate hearings. Temporary containment is recommended. Recommended isn't required, Walt said. Not if we can certify an enclosure, the vet tech offered quickly. Do you have a run? A pen? Claire pointed to the modest chain-link run she'd built for vet checks. It's small, but it's secure. We'll need something larger, the man said, his eyes already measuring her yard, and signage, protocols. Then we'll build it, Claire said, and I'll write them. The county courthouse smelled of old varnish and fear. For weeks, Claire walked its halls. The hearing began, a slow, grinding process designed to wear you down. The deputies testified first, their voices warming when they described the wolves sitting on command. An EMT read his notes. Puncture wounds to the left wrist, crushing trauma, clean margins, no tissue loss. The bite looked clinical, precise. More like a tool had been applied than a fury unleashed. Walt took the stand and told them what he saw. Wolves that held a line, a woman who gave a command and got the exact thing she asked for. The county attorney, a sharp woman named Prentice, tried to corner him. Isn't it true you've always been sympathetic to Miss Donovan's wolves? Walt tipped his face to the ceiling lights. I'm sympathetic to what I see, he said at last, and I saw restraint. But the town's fear was a powerful current. A group of ranchers, led by a man named Elias Thorne, whose land bordered the national forest, hired their own lawyer. They argued the wolves were a threat to livestock and children, that this incident proved they were killers waiting to happen. Thorne's voice was full of gravel and old anger. These ain't pets, he boomed. They're a menace. What happens next time a hiker gets too close? What happens when they get a taste for something other than burglars? The room was split. On one side, Claire, Walt, and the deputies. On the other, Thorne and the ranchers, their faces set and grim. The story was no longer just about Claire. It was about the line between the wild and the civilized, and who got to draw it. Then a twist. Sheriff Davidson got a call. A state trooper had found a man huddled in a bus station 2 counties over, shivering and malnourished. It was Ricky. He confessed everything. He described the break-in, the terror, the moment the wolves attacked. But then he said something that changed the entire case. It was Marcus's plan, he said, his voice trembling, but the tip came from someone here. Someone in your town. He couldn't give a name, only that Marcus had met with someone at a diner a week before the robbery. A local. Someone who hated Claire Donovan. Suddenly, the attack wasn't just a crime. It was a conspiracy. Someone in Cedar Falls had sent those men to her cabin. And the motive wasn't just money. It was personal. The county attorney called Claire back to the stand. Miss Donovan, do you acknowledge that keeping 2 wild grey wolves on your property creates an extraordinary risk to the public? Claire met her gaze. I acknowledge that all relationships with power carry risk, she said. We build roads. People die on them. We allow rifles. People die by them. We keep dogs. People are bitten. The question is whether the risk is managed and whether the benefit is real. These 2 saved my life. They have never harmed a non-threatening person. They are not pets, she paused, letting the room feel the weight of the next words. They are partners. Reporters scribbled furiously. Someone whispered the word partners as if trying it on for size. Wildlife Services brought in their expert, a behaviorist named Dr. Reyes. She spent a day at the cabin, watching, testing. A sudden clap. The wolves' heads went up, but they didn't lunge. A stranger moving quickly. Scotty changed her angle to block, but didn't advance. Dr. Reyes tossed a rubber knife at Claire's feet. Fenrir stepped forward, set a paw on the handle, and then looked to Claire as if to ask, "This?" Claire said, "Leave it," and he did. In court, Dr. Reyes delivered her findings. "What we're seeing is classic guarding behavior adapted to a human partner," she said. "They guard the den. They guard the alpha. They correct a threat and stand down on cue. I saw no predation signals directed at non-threatening humans. The animals behaved like a protective unit with a reliable off switch." The county attorney tried again, but a bite occurred. "Yes," Dr. Reyes said calmly, "on the weapon hand, followed by immediate release on verbal cue. That is not gratuitous aggression, that is a targeted disarm and hold." The hearing stretched on, a war of attrition. Each day, Claire walked out into a swarm of microphones. Elias Thorne and his ranchers were always there, their faces like thunderclouds, warning the reporters about the danger she represented. On the final day, the board filed in, their faces unreadable. The chair tapped her pen and began to read. "This board recognizes the exceptional circumstances of the incident," she began, her voice monotone. The room was so quiet you could hear a heartbreak. "By unanimous vote, the board designates the animals known as Fenrir and Scotty as guardians under ranger care. A special status. They are recognized as protective partners operating under a licensed ranger's control." Someone dropped a pen. It sounded like a gunshot. "Conditions apply," the chair continued. "A certified enclosure, signage, and Miss Donovan accepts full responsibility. This decision establishes no broad precedent, but acknowledges the unique control and context present here." The room erupted. Some people applauded. Elias Thorne slammed his fist on the table and stormed out, his face purple with rage. Claire let out a breath she'd been holding for a month and closed her eyes. When she opened them, Walt was there, one hand on the rail behind her, steadying her. She had won. But she knew Thorne wouldn't give up, and the informant, the person who had set this all in motion, was still out there, hiding in plain sight. The real fight was far from over. The rebuilding began with small things. Walt brought lumber. Neighbors who'd once feared the wolves showed up with sawhorses and coffee. They didn't say much, but their presence was a statement. They were choosing a side. Claire built the new run herself, not a cage, but a landscape. Double-height fencing sunk in concrete, a gate that opened with a silent, well-oiled bolt. Inside, she planted juniper and dragged in deadfall logs. Fenrir inspected the work each dusk, like a foreman. Scotty found every weak spot and pointed it out with a look that said, "Fix this." Claire did. The inspector from Wildlife Services wrote "exceeds" in 3 different boxes on his clipboard. With the enclosure certified, Claire wrote a new proposal. Bitterroot Guardians, Community Education and Therapeutic Observation. She sent it to the school district, to the VA outpatient clinic, to a trauma counselor. The first school group came on a Wednesday. Claire didn't pretend the wolves were cuddly. She taught the children to observe, to see the twitch of an ear, the shift of weight. A young boy, small and withdrawn, kept his eyes on the ground. Scotty matched him, lying down with her head low, until the boy finally lifted his gaze, a flicker of connection passing between them. "Do they like you?" a girl asked. "They trust me," Claire said. "That's different, and it's better." The veterans came on a grey afternoon. They stood in the buffer corridor, not talking at first. Fenrir walked the fence line and paused where one man, broad-shouldered with a scar peeking from his collar, rested a fist on the rail. Fenrir put his nose to the wire and inhaled. Then he turned his head, showing the man the torn line of scar on his own rear leg from the poacher's trap. "Got hit by something too," the man said after a long minute, his voice thick. "Didn't stop him," Claire said softly. "No," the man's eyes stayed on the wolf. "Changed him." The program was a quiet success, but the shadow of Elias Thorne still loomed. He'd started a petition to have the guardian status revoked. He spread rumors that the wolves were getting more aggressive, that Claire was training them to hunt. The division in town deepened. Then Sheriff Davidson got another break in the case. The owner of the diner remembered the meeting Ricky had described. Marcus had met with a man. An older man, a rancher. He paid in cash and he drove an old beat-up Ford truck. a truck just like the one Elias Thorne drove. Davidson brought Thorne in for questioning. He denied everything, his voice full of righteous fury. But when Davidson showed him the diner's security footage, a grainy image of him sitting across from Marcus Hale, Thorne's face went pale. He had a grudge against Claire's parents. Years ago, their research on wolf migration patterns had led to federal protections that restricted grazing on land Thorne believed was his. He saw it as a theft. When he heard about Claire's insurance money, he saw a chance for revenge. He fed Marcus the lie about a safe full of cash, never imagining it would spiral into a violent confrontation. He just wanted to scare her, to run her off the mountain he felt she had stolen from him. The news of Thorne's arrest was the final twist. The conspiracy was laid bare. The ranchers who had followed him felt betrayed and foolish. The petition fell apart. The fear in town began to recede, replaced by a grudging respect. Autumn laid itself down across the mountains like gold leaf. The work slowed. The wolves' coats thickened. One evening, Claire sat on her porch, a warm mug of coffee in her hands. The boards were new in places, old in others. Fenrir came first, settling to her left, a white mountain at rest. Scotty followed, laying to her right, her nose angled toward the forest. The sky was a masterpiece of honey and plum and pink. Claire watched it all, thinking of the journey. The trap in the snow, the shattered glass, the courtroom, the boy who looked up, the veteran who saw his own scars reflected in a wolf's leg. "They didn't give you to me," she said quietly, "to the wolves, to the mountains. You chose. And I chose back." Fenrir's ear flicked. Scotty sighed, a long exhale of steam in the cooling air. "I used to think survival meant control," Claire said to the fading light, "but it's more like trust. With teeth, you hold the line, you stand down when you can. You stand up when you must." She reached out and laid a hand on Fenrir's shoulder, then on Scotty's. Two touches, symmetrical, like a compass pointing home. "We are a pack," she said simply. Neither wolf moved. Both leaned into her hand, weight shared, balance equalized. The world would keep being itself, sharp and soft, cruel and tender. People would go on arguing. Agencies would make new forms. But on a porch in the Bitterroots, under a sky full of stars, a ranger and two white wolves would practice the only art that ever mattered in such a world. Living together without lying about what you are. Not pets, not monsters, not myths. Family. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. We'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below and let us know your favorite part. If you enjoyed the journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories like this one. And don't miss out. Hit the notification bell so you're always updated on our latest content. Your support truly means the world to us.